Second half of best music in the game.
This is like the only place in the game that feels like a real dungeon.
Yeah, because everything else is pretty much a straight line in some form.
Yeah, like I think Mount Lonicala, which is essentially Victory Road in this game, has like it's
There's like no pass in that.
Yeah.
like there's like a couple places where the path branches and there's an item at the end, and then you walk back. Like there's
And
Yeah.
why is it that RPGs seem to be forgetting to include dungeons in recent years? Like, I don't know, maybe
Because they're hard to make.
like I mean, I guess that's true.
it's more like designers seem to think that the concept of a dungeon is too video gamey. Well, first of all, it's not video gamey; it's tabletop RPG-ish. Thank you very much. But the developers seem to be leaning toward having realistic unquote locations that
Well, the thing is that you can have realistic quotation mark locations and still have great dungeons. Like for example, Shin Megami Tensei 4. One of my favorite dungeons in that game is basically just a giant like office building that one of the groups in the game repurposed into this weird medical lab. And the layout is interesting, and it's in terms of that, it's fine. But the story significance to that place is what makes it so great. So the layout doesn't even need to be super complicated in order for it to be a good dungeon, as long as you do something interesting with it.
yeah. It's like
I mean,
it's like the vast majority of shall we say dungeons in modern games tend to either be really weird locations that make no archaeological the building sense. I should...
and you just start giving the fairy MC.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, they clearly could not think of a trial for her in time, and so it's just like, okay, I'm here. Bye.
She has one in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but it's pointless.
It sucks.
You just go revisit every trial site and fight the trial captain.
Yeah, it's really, really dumb.
I like how this guy just had a Metal Gear Solid exclamation point moment because he snuck up behind him.
And the weird thing too is that this dungeon still even isn't all that long either. By like, if you compare it to like Silphco
It's still
something.
the longest in the game. But
Yeah.
My problem with dungeons is that like a lot of them tend to be pretty much just straight lines that call themselves dungeons.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in this game, particularly.
Yeah, there's a lot of it in this
Well, what do
game.
you expect out of a dungeon specifically?
Well, I can point again to Final Fantasy because it has examples of both kinds of design mentalities. If you compare, say, Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy V, for instance, where in Final Fantasy V there's some fairly complex design going into the dungeons you explore, and they're not necessarily non-linear. That's something I want to emphasize. Not necessarily linearity isn't what I'm talking about, but the things you do while exploring. Like my go-to example for JRPG dungeon design is still going to be probably Wild Arms 3, because there's a lot of puzzle solving going on. There's a lot of things to do while you're making your way through each location.
Basically, for me, it's basically just, stuff to look for and making it feel not like, even if it functionally is a linear experience, not making it feel like it's a straight line.
Yeah, like,
is the big thing.
When I bring up Final Fantasy VII, my mind always jumps to the Mithril Mine. You go through this interesting.
What part of the game is that again?
It's pretty close to the beginning. After you leave Midgar and then have the Sephiroth backstory thrown at you.
Is that part was
Yeah, there's this kind of like busy work thing that's still kind of interesting because it's an optional thing that you can do to avoid a really powerful optional boss. Or you can just fight the thing if you're good enough.
No, you wait. The Mithril Mines?
Yeah, Mithril Mine. It's right past the Zolom.
Yeah.
The-
What boss are you talking about?
The Zolom. The Zolom is the boss.
Oh no, okay. I thought the way you phrased it was like there's something inside the mine itself.
Yeah, like you have to either fight or avoid the Zolom, and that part is interesting. Once you get to the mine, it's like anticlimax the dungeon, because it's like there's 3 rooms. One of them is optional. It's got like maybe a materia and a treasure chest on it. but the rest of it is just like you pass through these 2 rooms, maybe fight 5 random battles. You have a scene with the Turks at the end, and then you're on the other side. It's like, okay, the Mines of Moria, this ain't. You kind of expect when you're going in that there's going to be some exploration and adventure to be had, but no, it's just kind of a tunnel.
I think the intention was the challenge to be avoiding the Zolom. So,
well, yeah, that or fighting it, but once you get to the mine itself, it kind of betrays the environment design in Final Fantasy VII, and it's not something that lets up for the rest of the game. And it's one of the aspects.
I remember
of its
the dungeons
design
in
that I
Final
don't really
Fantasy
like.
VII being fun enough. Like I don't.
Well,
really...
there are a few highlights. Like I think, well, the final dungeon is not.
The final
it's-
dungeon's particularly like mazy and long. Yeah.
Yeah,
but-
it's interesting in a setting sense, not necessarily a game design sense, because you're still just going through it fighting monsters, but it's
and it's been done before.
yeah,
in 6.
it's it is interesting in that there are two distinct paths that you can explore, but most of the environmental areas you go through in Final Fantasy VII tend to be pretty simplistic and don't take very long to get from one end to the other.
Which is probably why Temple of the Ages is probably one of the most notable
Temple of
dungeons in the
Ancients
entire
game. Is a really memorable one. To a lesser extent, Cosmo Canyon has a pretty good dungeon going for it. But for the most part, the game seems to have dispensed with, shall we say, traditional Final Fantasy dungeon design.
You see, well, to be fair, traditional doesn't always mean good, because if you go back to the dungeons in Final Fantasy 1, they're god awful.
It hasn't replaced it with anything that stands in its that fills the same role but better. You know, it just sort of it has a few big dungeons scattered across its 60 hours, but only a few.
Well, on the topic of Final Fantasy, what did you think of 15?
15?
Because 15 I thought kept it pretty interesting whenever you did come across a dungeon.
Yeah, 15 is okay in that respect.
It's at least different enough to where I remember it's not like 13's quote-unquote excuses for dungeons and all that.
Well, to bring it back to Pokemon, for example, not every dungeon needs to be a super a mega like puzzle type area. Like, because
no, if every place was a Victory Road, I'd cry.
like, or even just like a Silphco or a what's it called? The Team Rocket base, under the game corner. Like, those ones have specific puzzles and whatnot, but sometimes, you just get like a Mount Moon or a rock tunnel or even like a Lavender Tower where, it's basically like just a couple of rooms and you're trying to find your way up. Like, as long as what you're doing doesn't seem too mindless, I don't like, again, like one of my favorite series is Dragon Quest. The dungeons in that series don't usually have a lot of puzzles. It's more just about, okay, I want to explore everything.
Yeah.
And you can either go down the main path and not fight as many battles or try to find everything, and you hate yourself because you're out of herbs and you're going to die.
I guess the big thing is that it kind of hampers the sense of adventure when those locations that should be significant steps on your journey wind up being fairly insignificant set pieces instead. Wow, did she just pop out of existence there? That's...
Yep.
Okay.
During the animation for the movie, yeah.
That happens with a lot of
Clef
them.
Key.
The keyring Pokemon.
Every generation has one.
I know every generation has one, but this one in particular, it's like, wow, guys.
Yeah, give me the ice cream
Just
cone
like the
again.
first thing you saw when you glanced out of your store.
Says the guy who
first
likes
thing you
Kingdom
saw.
Hearts.
Oh,
all right?
God! Those keys are part of its
Wait.
body, aren't they?
Yeah.
What are you getting
When
at?
it
Ted?
Oh,
fades,
you-
the keys
oh.
fall off.
Keys are okay when Kingdom Hearts does it, but Pokemon has keys. This is the
Well,
worst.
yeah, but-
I'm talking about the design of a Pokemon. When it's like, come on, man, I can't tell if I find it lazier than Voltorb.
Well, Voltorb was supposed to be the Pokemon version of a Mimic, so it at least served a function. Mimic monsters that disguise themselves as treasure chests, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The bane of every Dark Souls player's existence, the monster that will always
Hey
kill you
man,
the
I'm
first
old
time you
school,
encounter
all
it.
right? Mimics have been scaring me
Impossible
since
to do.
Dragon Quest 3, all right?
Mimics
monster in
are
a box.
terrifying in Dark Souls and Palace of the Dead.
Well,
14.
they're especially scary in Dark Souls because what winds up happening when you trip across a mimic in the Dark Souls series is it eats you and kills you.
We walked into a bar to talk about how we were fighting a mimic. I laughed, the bartender laughed, the table laughed. We all had a good time.
I think the thing in Dark Souls is that when you find a treasure chest, because you're so afraid of being killed by a mimic, you're tempted to attack the chest before you open it. But if you break the chest and it's an actual chest, you risk destroying items or damaging.
Well, why would you destroy the items if they were in the chest? You just broke the chest.
I think there's this lore thing where items can only exist in the Dark Souls universe if they're either on a body or in a box. Which is why,
bullshit.
like, at the
Okay,
beginning of Dark Souls, like, this guy finds you finds you as a zombie in a jail cell, and instead of tossing you the key, he tosses you down a body that has the key on it. So, it's very strange. Dark Souls is a weird series, and I'm not equipped to go into the hours upon hours of lore video material that it provides.
Yeah, because God forbid the game actually just tell you some of this.
Well,
stuff.
you know, that's part of its charm is solving the mystery.
I understand that, but there's a difference between being able to read between the lines and not having lines to read between.
Well,
and
there
I'm
are
not
lines to read between. There is plenty of that. It's very, I want to say Five Nights at Freddy-esque in the sense that you're given the pieces. You're given the pieces, but you're not necessarily explained. You don't necessarily know which pieces are actual pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, but then you see, but then you run into the thing where, you know, fan theories are accepted as general fact by the fan base until they're not facts anymore.
Well, only because the creator won't confirm or deny.
It can be an issue from time to time.
Yeah.
But I still find it interesting, and I would be more into the series if I had an easier time getting into the gameplay enough to not die all the time.
you just have to get good. I can't even joke about that.
You do have to get
Dark
good,
Souls really is the Cuphead of our time.
Yeah.
you do have to get good, but I don't have the patience to do that a lot of the time.
But I don't have the
you
good
see,
to get...
I that's one thing I won't ever forgive Dark Souls for, is making that like an actual argument that people will have. It's just like, oh, I'm having trouble with this. Instead of people being supportive about it, they just think, oh, they can yell, get good, and then that's just as not obnoxious.
No,
all right.
Here's a better answer. Why don't you give them some advice?
Yeah. Oh, nobody gave them advice, Lewis, so why should they be nice to people? All right? Jeez.
Those people are liars who used a guide to find out everything they knew about the game.
How dare you suggest human decency, Lewis? Gosh.
And
why is
that's
Conrad
the end of the dungeon.
Oh, red screen. Oh, okay. All right.
We'll be moving to important things next part.
I don't know why. The way you just stopped and stared at the screen, I was just expecting a sudden
That was
zoom
like,
in on the
okay,
face.
at the last moment, you just decided to do a Sonic.exe moment with the smiling protagonist.
Yeah. Always watching.